Cool. Right. I think we're good. If there's any problems, stick it in the chat and let me know. Otherwise, I'll just ramble on through this. Okay. So obviously session one, that's my name, Phil Needham, as you probably know. So hold on. There we go. So what we're going to cover, we're going to go through sort of what the flags are on the beach, how the lifeguards work, and then just the basic beach environment. So, you know, tides, waves, rip currents, and then what to do in those situations. So in this session, we're going to cover the flags, the sort of lifeguards, how waves are formed, how tides work. And then in tomorrow's session, we're going to cover rip currents, how to spot them, how they work, how to get out of them if you're in one, you don't want to be in one, and then also how to read a surf forecast, which is not really a surf forecast, it's more like the local beach environment. So yeah, so that's what we're going to go through. So right, let's start. So it's a bit of background about me, just so you know, I sort of know roughly what I'm talking about. So I worked as a beach lifeguard for 13 seasons. I instructed the beach lifeguard course, which this sort of beach safety course is one module of the beach lifeguard course, pretty much really. So if you were to do a beach lifeguard course, you would have a good sort of foundation knowledge of what you need to know. Obviously, there's more stuff like rescues and first aid. And yeah, there's some other stuff I've done there, which you don't really need to go into. Okay, so this is basically the main message: swim between the red and yellow flags. We're obviously going to cover rips and how this all works, but if anyone sort of gives you advice, it's always going to be swim at a lifeguarded beach, swim between the red and yellow flags. If you're surfing, go between the black and white checkered flags if they have them. So you obviously we're going to cover everything else, and it's up to you what you do with that information. But I would always advise swim at a lifeguarded beach between the flags. There's obviously a bit of a disclaimer down there. You might say, well, I've learned about rips, I know what's going on. But you're in the safest possible place between those flags. If you think the amount of like first aid equipment they've got and the response time, you know, if you had any sort of a medical emergency, the best place to be is, you know, I would say between those flags or in a hospital to get people to sort you out pretty quickly. So the RNLI, there's a few bits from the RNLI in this. They've given us permission to use them. Thanks to Guy Botterill at the local lifeguard centre for that. But it's obviously not affiliated with the RNLI or Surf Life Saving Great Britain. Okay. So these are the flags. You probably know them. Red and yellow flags is for swimming and bodyboarding. The black and white flags is for surfboards, kayaks, that sort of thing. Red flag, if the red flag's flying or on the beach, that means don't go in the water. And the windsock, which is probably the least known one of all these. That's if there's an offshore wind, they stick the windsock up, which means don't take inflatables in the sea. Yeah, kind of that's the one that isn't respected very much and should be, because that's when a lot of accidents happen. So the red flag, often people go to the beach, see the red flag, but you don't know why that red flag's up. It could be because of a pollution incident or something else. So it's worth just, if you're going to ignore it, ask the lifeguards why, because often it's the runoff from the fields or something. There's a pollution, not just the size of the waves. So it could be many things that's involved in. So it's same as the last one. So basically it's going to be two flags. You go between the two flags. It's as simple as that. The black and white checkered flags, obviously if you got like surfing craft or yeah, like it says windsurfers, that sort of thing, that's where you're going to go. Basically between the red and yellow flags, you're swimming or you're bodyboarding. Anything else is is not in between those flags. If you've got to learn a surfboard, again, that's between the black and white flags. Most beaches, if they have waves, will have black and white flags out now. Okay, so that's the basic So that's the basic bit done, which most people probably will know anyway. So this is how do you find the beach to go to, and if there are lifeguards operating. So that's the website. Basically, you go find beach RNLI into Google, and you'll come up to this page. I just typed in Hale, as you can see on the left-hand side, and then you get all the beaches around there. So the RNLI website is very good for that. And then if you go to, I clicked on Gwythian, and it gave me all the information about Gwythian Beach. So I did this a little while ago, and they hadn't updated the sort of times that they were operating. So at the minute, it says like 27th of June to the 1st of November. That was like last year, COVID, all that sort of stuff. But I think you'll find the lifeguards are doing their induction at the minute, and the main beaches, Gwythian, Porthmeer, and Sennen, are going to be open from Easter. Hale might be open the weekend or the 2 weeks, and then the rest of them might be open all the way through until some are open all the way till like November, October. So, but if you're not sure, this is a great website. Go check it out and find out, you know, if the lifeguards are on. I'll just give you a bit of the weather and stuff as well, and a bit of information like access, you know, disabled access, all that sort of thing, which is useful to know. So when you get to the beach, especially, this is more if you go onto the beach for the first time, you're not sure, you know, what you're getting yourself in for, where the dangers. So most of the beaches now have these signs. Like this is obviously UK. Obviously, there's signs like this in pretty much all the other countries you go to as well. So at the top left-hand side, it's got like a code. It's got the Southwest 554388, which is like if you're going to phone the emergency services, then that's probably the grid reference you're going to give them. 10 till 6, the lifeguard times, that's pretty much universal, definitely around the UK. Some places do work a bit later, so 10 till 6 is the standard time, unless there's something really busy going on, and then they sometimes work a bit later. And then you got a whole load of warning things. So what's it say? Strong currents in the river, that's obviously the biggest danger. If you see the picture at the bottom, the Hale Estuary, as we probably all know, is the most dangerous part of this beach. Tidal cutoff, so that's another issue. If you're going to go where this pitch is taken in front of the Surf Life Saving Club, if you're going to go around to the right to the Blackcliff rocks, then lots of people get cut off by the tide there, and you know, kite surfers, windsurfers, and then obviously got your signs saying lifeguards aren't working on the beach, dog walking sign at the top. So basically, come to the sign, look at it, get all the information, and this is how they vary a little bit. So this is the Perranporth one. So differences there on that sort of map, they got a big red area, and that is obviously because they got an issue with power kites. So yeah, they don't want people using them there. Again, that's sort of, so that's where you want to go for your information. And then the next thing you want to do, if you've seen that sign or it's not got enough information, you go speak to the lifeguards. If you're going down to the beach and you're not sure, the lifeguard's there to give you the information. Just go and have a quick chat, especially if maybe more experienced. You're going to like, well, I'm not going to go between the flags, so I'm going to swim because I'm training for some massive triathlon. I'm going to swim along the beach. If you're going to speak to the lifeguard, say, look, this is what I plan to do. They might say, yeah, cool. You know, if you have that's your competency, that's obviously the risk you're taking. But if you tell them, they're going to keep a bit of an eye out for you. Like if you swam from Hale to Gwythian and it's like a dead flat day, not a ripple in the sea, I'm sure they would say, you know, if it's obviously at your own risk, like going to the seas all the time. But at least if you tell them, then they can pass that information on to all the other lifeguard stations. And yeah, no, as you swim up the beach, each lifeguard station can be keeping an eye out for you. They'll radio along and say, yeah, he's coming, he's in your bit now. So it's obviously worth speaking to the lifeguards, find out if there's rocks or anything like that. So yeah, I say don't be afraid of going and having a chat, unless obviously they're busy dealing with some sort of first aid. But yeah, they'd rather you speak to them than just ignore them and do something silly. Okay, so that is basically the beach information section. Most people probably should be pretty aware of that. I think people walk past these signs, don't give them enough attention and don't realize the lifeguards are there, and they get asked 1,000 questions every day. They'd rather answer them than, you know, you just, yeah, go and do something silly. So the next bit, what do you do if you get in trouble in the water? So lovely poster by the RNLI that you can download this off their website if you want to stick it on your wall. So split it into 6 different stages. Number 1 is probably the most important one, I reckon. Keep calm. So keep calm. Can't say that enough. Like if you're in the sea and you're panicking, that's the worst possible thing. If you stay calm, life's going to be so much better. So lean back, get your head out of the water, push your belly up like the person's doing, move your hands to help you float. It's all basically trying to calm you down, get you in a position where you don't have to expend any energy. And then, do this, relax, and then raise your hand. So basically that is a key point really, is raising your hand, because the lifeguards don't really know your swimming ability. They might be looking at you, they're looking at a lot of people, and they don't know who's feeling okay and who's in trouble and needs rescuing. It's hard to tell, but as soon as you start signaling, raise your hand and waving, they will be down there like a shot. So that is probably one of the key points. Relax, take your time, and wave. As soon as you wave for assistance, someone's going to come absolutely flying to come and get you. So that is good advice from the RLI. So next, right, minimizing your risk. It's all kind of going to the sea in sort of maybe a potentially dangerous environment. It's all about sort of risk assessing and how to minimize that with how much fun you're having, and work out what's the good balance. So like I said, swim, bodyboard between the flags. I mean, unless you're doing some long distance swimming where you can still go between the red and yellow flags back and forth, it's pretty silly to swim or bodyboard anywhere else really if the lifeguard's on duty. I don't know why you would. Go with a friend, if you're not feeling well, you say to your friend, I don't feel good, then they can help you get out of the water. And that's the same for surfing. It's always best to be there with someone to help you out. And also if you're not sure of the conditions, you could, if you're on your own, you might be tempted to go in or not go in. But if you speak to a friend, you can talk it out. There's no harm in going to a different beach if the waves are too big for you or whatever. So use an open water swim float. That's just what the guy is doing in this picture. So relatively new objects, these ones. You can put your phone in it, keeps your car keys dry, but also adds visibility to like jet skis, boats, anyone using the sea, maybe going fast, not really looking out. If you got one of these swim floats, and I'd say what this chap's not doing, I'd put like a brightly coloured swim hat on as well. Most wetsuits have sort of quite bright bits on the arm of the swimming wetsuit. So if you're doing distance swimming, I'd say get one of these, well worth the investment. I think you get them for like 20 quid now. And the bottom bit, pool noodles, toys, if you've got a little baby and you're going to put them on those inflatable seat things, they're not designed for the sea. Even the sea on a flat day, a bit of chop in the water, flips it over, gives you a bit of confidence. You go too far out to sea and you get in trouble. So all that sort of pool stuff, keep it in a swimming pool, basically. Right, so that's basic advice. Now, I'm going to go to on the beach environment. So we're going to cover tides, waves. I'm not going to do rips today. So next up, we've got, I think it's our favourite professor, giving us a little bit of information about the tides. So let's get him going.
We usually think of the moon in orbit around the Earth as the Earth stays still, but that's not quite right. Actually, they're both in orbit. They're in orbit around a point called the common centre of mass of the Earth-Moon system. So essentially what's happening is something like that, although it's quite difficult to do. Now, when things rotate around in circles, other forces come into play. In this case, a force called the centrifugal force. So that's a force you'd feel if you're hanging onto a roundabout going faster and faster, and you have to hang on tighter and tighter because of the force trying to throw you off. That's the centrifugal force. Now, let's bring the moon back. So now there are two forces at play in this system. There's a gravitational pull of the moon, pull everything towards it, And there's that centrifugal force trying to throw everything off. But think about the ocean here. That's closer to the moon, and so the moon's gravitational pull wins and you get a tidal bulge. Now think about this point on this side of the Earth. That's farther away from the moon, so the centrifugal force wins, throwing the water off, and you get a tidal bulge. And now the Earth just rotates underneath those tides once a day, and that's why you get 2 tides every day.
Okay, so great explanation there. If you are still confused after that, don't worry. Basically, all you need to get from that is that the sun and moon are affecting the tides. Okay, I'll go into a bit more information about what you actually need to know in a second. So you might have heard people say about spring tides and neap tides. These are kind of just phrases given to big tides and small tides. So when they say spring tide, they mean the tide goes out further and it comes in further. So the lower tide would be lower, the higher tide would be higher. And a neap tide is the opposite of that. Basically, it doesn't go out as far and it doesn't come in as far. So yeah, some nice words to know. So the main danger of tides is obviously tidal cutoff. So this picture on the right hand side is taken pretty much from the same spot. Everyone knows where this is. So yeah, but I mean, there, you walk along the causeway, you get a bit wet, it's no drama. But where you go to like maybe some cliffs and you go around a point, then the tide comes in, you're distracted. That's where things get a bit more serious. So the most common sort of one I've seen that's quite dangerous is if you're at Porthtowan and you walk to the right hand side looking out to sea as if you're going to go to Chapel Porth, and there's sort of a cove between the two. When I was working there, we always had to pick up people from that bit, and sometimes that gets a bit hairy. And often if you're at Hale Beach in the cove, you'll see people coming across with their stuff held up high as they go through the little sort of channels, because obviously this tide doesn't come in straight away, it comes in sort of almost at an angle, and then there's shallower bits, deeper bits. And yeah, so you kind of got to keep your awareness up when you're at the beach and see where the tide is. So we're going to go into more of the actual things you need to know next. So this is the basic information that you really need to know. There's 6 hours roughly between high tide and low tide. So if you know when high tide is, you roughly know when low tide is. And the tides move on 1 hour roughly per day. So if high tide today is 12 o'clock, high tide tomorrow is roughly 1 o'clock, then 2 o'clock next day. So it's pretty simple. If you knew the tide like on Tuesday, you could roughly work it out. It does vary a bit, in a few days later. But in Cornwall, we're super lucky because spring tides and neap tides are very easy to remember. So if it's high tide at 6, kind of 7 in the evening or in the morning, it's a spring tide. If it's high tide in the middle of the day, 12, 1 o'clock, it's a neap tide, which is super convenient. Because if you think you're at the beach on a Saturday or Sunday and it's high tide in the middle of the day, it's only going to come in a little way because a neap tide is the smallest tide. But imagine if that was the other way around, spring tides were in the middle of the day, it would mean there's a lot less beach space for people to sit on the beach. So that is super convenient. In the bottom of the slide here, you'll see there's an old sort of book. You can still get these books. It's what everyone was using until a few years ago, I guess. And it tells you the tide times. And you just got adjustments for a few minutes depending on what location you are in Cornwall. I think that says Devon. Yep. Okay, so the more modern way of reading the tide is to use a forecasting like Magic Seaweed. That's the premium surf forecasting tide coastal condition forecasting website at the minute. So I'll tell you how to read their tide data. Basically, Magic Seaweed do things graphically and I guess numerically. So I personally only look at the right-hand side of this picture. So I'd look at, when low tide is, when high tide is, it's got sunrise and sunset as well. But other people find the graphical form a bit better. So I'll talk you through that. Basically, the top section, the gray to light gray, is daylight. And the green, light green and dark green, is the tide. And I think if you go on their website now, it's got a blue bar to say exactly what time you are at now. So from this, you can tell high tide is just after 9 o'clock. Sort of sun's up by 7. I mean, you could read that by going the numbers, but just looking at the chart, low tide, what's it say, about 3:45? Yeah, it's pretty much what it is. So depending on how you sort of work, you've got those two sort of different ones to look at. So that's the easiest way to find out the tide times. I'll go more into how to read Magic Seaweed and how to know what you're looking at in tomorrow's session, because we're going to go into more about the wind and the waves on that one. So that's that. So that's the tides covered. If you have any questions, obviously let me know after. Tides can be quite confusing. I say the main points is you need to know it's about 6 hours between tides, high and low tide, and it moves on by an hour per day. That's the bit you need to know. Okay, so wind. Obviously the wind, massive effect. It's always windy here. You need to know which directions the wind's going. If it's like a strong onshore wind, you might want to go down the south coast. A northerly wind, you might go to the south coast. If it's a strong southerly wind, you might want to go to the north coast, depending if you want to be sheltered. Even if you're going for like a nice walk on the beach, I'd always look at the wind direction to decide where I'm going to go, so I don't have the wind blowing in my face. So if you turn up at the beach, look at the flag, see where it's going. If you haven't looked at the forecast before, see which way the clouds are going, see where the wind's going on your face. Because if you're going in the sea, the wind might blow you down to see if it's going cross shore. So you might think, right, well, I'm going to get blown that way. I'm going to start in by this Rainier flag. So I'm going to get blown across the bathing area. I'm going to get out at the other Rainier flag, out of the water, walk back up and get back in. So you might want to look at that. The windsock's obviously the biggest tool the lifeguards have to tell you when the wind direction is offshore. Quite strict on no inflatables. Interesting to see how that plays out with SUPs. I mean, inflatable SUPs on the surf beach probably aren't the best combo anyway. I think they might not be classed as an inflatable, or they might be. The wind does have a big effect on them, so I would never take an inflatable SUP, stand-up paddleboard that is, in the sea in any strong wind conditions. But you might think surfers obviously love an offshore wind direction, makes the waves look cleaner. So if you see loads of people in the water and you think it's really good, it might not be the time to take the inflatable unicorn in, because it won't be too nice. You'll blown out to sea. Okay, so now we have a video explaining how waves are formed. Kind of gets a little bit complicated, but the basic points should be pretty easy to understand.
In this week's episode of Surfing Explained, we're going to explore how an ocean wave is formed. Waves are created by wind blowing over the surface of the ocean. Initially, this creates tiny ripples known as capillary waves. It is not fully understood how this formation occurs, as the surface tension of water makes the process difficult to observe at a molecular level. That said, we're pretty sure there are two methods by which wind energy is transferred from the air to the water. First, small changes in air pressure created by fluctuations in the wind will either push down on the ocean surface as high pressure or lift up on the ocean surface during lower air pressure. Second, when the wind blows directly across the ocean surface, the shear force between the stationary water molecules and the moving air molecules cause the incompressible water molecules to push over each other in the same direction as the wind. Water molecules' strong attraction to each other creates a surface tension that limits the energy of these capillary waves, which are often just a few millimeters high. and as soon as the wind stops, the surface tension will smooth these ripples back to a mirror finish. If the wind continues though, capillary waves can grow into larger gravity waves, where they have enough energy to overcome the surface tension, and the controlling force then becomes gravity, attempting to pull the now larger waves back down again. As wind blows over the wave shape from behind, air is directed upwards and compressed over the crest, pulling the water and wave upwards with it. Low pressure and eddies in the wind on the downwind wave face then also draw the leeward side up as well, making the wave even bigger, which will direct even more wind upwards. There are three factors during this process that will decide whether waves will absorb enough energy to be surfable when they reach shore: the wind speed, the duration of time the wind blows for, and the distance over which the wind blows, known as the fetch. And for any given wind speed, duration, and fetch, there is a theoretical maximum wave height that can be created. So, in order to create the biggest waves, we need a strong wind to blow over a large area for a long period of time. As an example, an average hurricane is around 500 kilometers in diameter, with wind speeds well over 200 kilometers per hour that can blow for many days. During a storm, wave height increases faster than the wave period increases, creating tall, narrow waves that are unstable and topple over into what are called whitecaps. When a wave reaches this height, energy can still be added, but it will do so by increasing the wave energy below the surface, and thus increasing the wave period. And as the wave period increases, so does the maximum wave height before the wave topples into a whitecap. As wave period increases, so does the speed at which the wave travels. Once the speed of the wave is faster than the wind speed, normally due to the storm dying away, no more energy will be added to the wave, and it will start its journey out away from the fetch area. Waves within the fetch area are called wind swell, and are often bumpy and irregular as wind gusts of different strength and direction create a mix of small and large waves travelling over each other in all directions. Once the waves travel out the fetch area, they are known as groundswell. These groundswell waves can have enough energy to cross thousands of miles of ocean before arriving at the beach, which leads us nicely to next week's episode on how the waves propagate across the ocean. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you then.
Okay. Yeah, that did get a little bit technical at times there. I'll summarize the main points, so you don't need to know all of that stuff really. Basically, if you get a really big storm and wind blowing in the Atlantic, if it blows for longer and stronger, you're going to get bigger waves. If the wind just blows, say it's dead flat, and the wind blows slight, mild onshore breeze, and you're at the beach, you can kind of get that little wind chop because those waves have literally just traveled 2 miles. But if you get like a mega tornado or whatever in the Atlantic for like days and days, by the time those waves get to us in the UK, it's a lot, the waves have a lot more power, they're moving faster, and so the bigger storms in the Atlantic are the waves that create the best sort of surfing conditions in the UK. If you just get short bits of wind blowing here and there, that's why you don't get big waves, which is I guess why the Mediterranean isn't a mega surf spot, because they haven't got the fetch, the area for the wind to blow over for the long period of time. So that's how waves are formed. You just need to know sort of the fundamentals really. It's just nice to know. So the bottom part of this is this topography really of what's under the sea affects how the waves hit the shore. So I'm going to give you quite an extreme example in a minute of somewhere down in Portugal. But its relevance to here is that you could go to a beach and it's high tide, mid-high tide maybe. You get a Gwydion, and the waves are kind of gentle, just toppling over each other, nice learner waves. But if you get it on a spring low tide, especially say at Hale at the river mouth, the waves break in like really shallow water and are really powerful. So just because it's the same beach doesn't mean the waves are going to be the same all the time. The waves are very different at low tide than they are to high tide, because at high tide, where you can see what the beach is like when it's low tide, and it's just gently sloping, so the waves just gently break as they come through. Whereas at low tide, the water's going from quite deep to quite shallow very quickly. So the effect of that is what this next video explains, to give you a dramatic sort of scene. So I'll just go on to this one.
Have a look at it. Of course, the Northern Pacific hosting big waves through the winter. So does the North Atlantic. As we zoom in here to the western shores of Europe, that fishing town of Nazaré now becoming a famous big wave icon. There is your overview of the town itself, and there's the split between the South Beach, which remains virtually flat no matter how big the swell energy, and how it squeezes into the Playa del Norte. This, of course, was the scenes of the big wave tour just a few days back. Here's the mechanics of how the wave works from basically 10 foot through to possibly one day 100 foot.
Well, the Nazaré Canyon is a absolute amplification machine, and surfers worldwide know the value of an offshore canyon. This one's up to 8,000 feet deep, just a few miles offshore, and that allows the waves to come in at a much greater speed, but it also tends to bend one wave train slightly from a different angle, and then when those two trains peak, the peaks cross up, and that's what the famous sort of A-frame peak.
So basically what those guys were getting at, and what's trying to show you, is that this canyon here creates really, really big waves just by these rocks, but a few hundred meters up the beach this way, the waves are maybe a third of the size, and just down this way, this beach, which is where the sort of the city is pretty much flat the whole time. So it just shows that what's happening underneath the sea has a massive effect of what happens on top. So yeah, like I said, that's low tide, high tide. That's why people surf the reef at Porthleven, because it goes straight from fairly deep, nothing like this, to yeah, quite shallow rocks. So hold up,
Have a look at it.
next here.
Have a look at it.
There you go away. Okay, this is just, yeah, this little clip of Tom Butler from Cornwall surfing the waves. But you just got to remember, in this video here, he's surfing here, and like a few hundred meters down, the beach is flat. A few hundred meters up the beach, the waves are like a third of the size of this. It's quite an interesting place to go. Me and Kirsty went there on a honeymoon, and you look to the right and you think, yeah, I could surf that. It's all right. And then you look to the left and you think, no way would I get in the sea there. So yeah, just watch this. Yeah, so what you got to remember when they're surfing these waves, these guys have got like special vests that inflate. They've got jet skis around them, so they're eliminating a lot of risk. They're not just people going into the sea for the first time and trying to surf these sort of waves. So there's a whole bunch of precautions they take. So yeah, that's basically how underneath the sea can affect what's on top. So it's just low tide, high tide, that's the effect it has here. So there's just a few definitions of waves. I mean, they like to group things into give it names, don't they, everyone? Spilling waves. So this is like, if you're going to surf, learn to surf, you know, Gwythian, this is generally the waves you're getting. Dumping waves, this could be like a very low tide, or maybe Prosan sometimes, quite powerful dumping waves. And surging waves is, people warn you of, because it's like a wave doesn't really break and lose its power. So you could be walking on the beach at high tide, you don't see the wave break, but it just comes up and then it knock you off your feet and, well, drag you into deep water, or just get you wet probably. Okay, so some wave stats. One wave in every 23, twice the average size. You can read the rest of them. Basically, every now and then the waves are a lot bigger. So basically waves come in sets, which is groups. So you get maybe 6 waves, then you get, it goes flat for a little bit, and then you get some more waves. And every now and then these waves, these sets are sometimes bigger than the previous ones. So this is important to know, because if you're going to go into the sea, say you're just swimming, there's waves that keep pushing you into the shallows, and then it goes flat for a little while. You could be tempted to swim out, depending on your ability. That might be the right thing to do. But you've got to realize in a minute or two, bigger waves are going to come in, and you could be in a situation where you don't want to be in. So you just got to remember that waves come in sets, then there's lulls. Sometimes these lulls go on for quite a long time, and sometimes the sets are a lot bigger than the previous sets of waves. So, and also if you're going to go surfing, use this to your advantage. You see like a big set of waves coming in, there's no point wasting your energy trying to get through it. Wait a little bit, wait till it comes in. Then when there's that break, then you paddle out. So yeah, you just got to know that they come in sets and then there's lulls. So we're doing pretty well. So this is kind of the basic knowledge we've covered today. This is going to build on to learn how we can look at rips tomorrow, how we can identify them, how we can swim out of them. But you kind of need to know how waves are formed, what effect the wind has, before you can really get to that stage. So, hold on. So the last bit we're going to cover is cold water. Pretty much the same as we did at the start. How, what you should do. This has been quite a hot topic lately for the RNLI. I think they've been going a lot of schools up country, and yeah, giving this advice to, like, children might fall into like a canal or something, but it's quite useful for us to know. And so what are the 5 steps to floating? Follow your instinct to swim hard and thrash about. Basically, relax, lean back, extend your arms and legs out. Give yourself a bit of a surface area, make it easier to float. That's what that's saying. If you can, move your arms and legs. If you need to help float, control your breathing, and then call for help or swim. So basically, when you go into cold water, your body sort of shuts down a bit. So you've just got to relax, maybe focus on your breathing, give your body time to adjust, and then take some action. It's best to, like all things in the sea, it's pretty much best to be relaxed, take your time. Like, it's not really a dangerous environment if you're relaxed. If you're stressed and panicking, then you might get into a worse situation. So, but it's good to know. That's all right. So now we're just going to summarize. We've done okay-ish for time. So the basics: flags, swim at a lifeguarded beach, between the flags. That's kind of the headline. Then we looked at the tides and how they work: spring tides, neap tides, maybe tidal cutoff. I didn't cover. Another important point is, if on a spring low tide, you're going to go around from Porthkidney to Carvis Bay. Obviously at a neap tide, you can't, it's not possible. So that's quite hard to see when the spring lows are lower, but that is one of the most obvious things around here to tell you when it's a spring low tide, and you can maybe do that walk. And if you get cut off at Carvis Bay, just walk along the cliff path. We look for the wave types, more importantly how they form, knowing that they come in sets. Then you get a lull, they vary in size. We're going to go tomorrow to know more about if the waves are from, like that dude said, a groundswell. Are they going to be more powerful than other waves that maybe have just been created from a bit of wind locally? So we're going to get into that tomorrow as well, so you can sort of see what sort of, the difference in the power of the waves and what might be suitable for your abilities. So tomorrow is all kind of about rips, spotting them, finding the right conditions for your activity. So these slides are going to be available as well as tomorrow's, and this video is recorded as well, hopefully, so you can probably watch it again. And so this is all going to be on a website. What's it called? I'll put it in the chat. And sorry. It's back here. Okay, so now I'm going to stop the screen share, and if you've got any questions, you can let me know.